What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, this video is brought to you by NutriBio Supplements, Crystals Bikinis, and Bio Longevity Labs. If you don't know, I got kicked off Instagram. I'm not quite sure why. They didn't give me a reason. I was originally limited or got some type of warning for talking about Bio Longevity Labs a few weeks back. And then yesterday, went to open Instagram and they told me that my account has been permanently disabled. Didn't give me a reason why. They gave me the opportunity to appeal. So I clicked the button to appeal. It says if they uphold their decision, that account is permanently deleted, which is a bummer. Obviously, running your own business that's predominantly online. And, just using that page to stay in touch with the bodybuilding community. I've always exclusively used Instagram and that account for bodybuilding. I post little to nothing about my personal life. That's kind of my bodybuilding outlet. And I've gone all over the world. I've had many different experiences within bodybuilding, met different people, and that's how I stay in touch with them. So a little bit of a bummer, but in case you guys see that I'm not on Instagram, that's why. With that said, I'd ask if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you don't, I saw some analytics the other day. More than half of the people that consistently watch the videos don't subscribe to the channel. If you guys find this information valuable or interesting, do me a favor and click subscribe. It takes just 2 seconds. So, with that said, moving forward, if you guys want to leave questions for these types of videos or for the podcast, you can leave them as a comment under a video. I will save it and get to it the next time. I also have a private Facebook group for the One More Rep podcast. So check me out there, because if they permanently delete this Instagram account, I'm not going to for lack of a better term, I'm not going to continue to give them my business. I'm not going to try to make another account. So with that said, let me get into some questions. So once again, I got asked EQ or Primobolan for the off season. I've talked about this a bunch. I'll keep this one short and sweet. At this point, I think Primobolan is a fool's drug. Even if all things were equal, you know that both drugs are completely real. You know that the quality is good, what have you. You're talking about a drug that is, in my opinion, less potent for building muscle, lower milligram concentration, and anywhere from 2 to 4 times the price. And then again, with the potential risk that it may be fake. So to me, it just makes no sense. Even before all this shortage talk, I was not a fan of Primobolan. I think that the risk is too high. I've seen too many bunk tests where a lot of times people are getting Primobolan that is actually EQ, it's actually masked, it's actually test probe, and you paid $140, $180 a vial for 10 ml. It makes no sense to me. And again, if we're talking about building muscle and potential training performance carryover or benefits, EQ is way more potent to me. So it really comes down to, do you tolerate it in terms of your blood pressure, your blood markers on blood work? And then I've also heard a small but fairly consistent percentage of people say that EQ can give them some type of anxiety. If you're not one of these people that has any of these side effects, EQ is a no-brainer for me. I love it. What are some symptoms of fatigue that athletes in contest prep should look out for to determine when they've surpassed a level of acceptable fatigue and they need to pull back? I think you just constantly need to be in communication with your coach, especially a lot of times it seems like I naturally attract guys that are workhorses and they have a lot of pride and they want to prove to me or not let me down. They want to prove that they are all in hardcore bodybuilders. And for any of you that are clients or considering to be clients of mine or someone else's, I can tell you as a coach, that is only going to be to both of our detriment. It's going to be to your detriment because I'm not getting all the feedback that I need. It's going to be to my detriment because at the end of the day, your stage look is a representation of my business and my name. So it just comes down to putting your ego and your pride aside and communicating. Now, in terms of what you should be looking for, I think it's difficult to describe, but there's a fine line between being a little tired, um, maybe not necessarily feeling like you want to go to the gym versus not being able to get off the couch, barely being able to get out of bed, and then not even really being able to move the weights that you typically warm up with in the gym. I think those are all like the training performance one is the most objective way of putting it. If your training performance rapidly and dramatically falls off a cliff, that is something you must relay to your coach. And it's probably been too long that you've let it go. See, I have this gray hair here. It's driving me nuts. Um, Now, there is going to be some loss of performance, training performance, if you are getting properly stage peeled. I don't care what anyone else says. If anyone else is saying that that's not the case and you're going to train full blown off season, the same performance as when you're 3 weeks out from a contest with walking around with striated glutes, that person has just never done it. Why would we bother getting so heavy and taking all these drugs and eating all this food in the off season if I could perform the same way at 5% body fat? That just doesn't make any sense. Of course, there's going to be performance loss. I think the rate of decline and how dramatic the decline is are the two most objective ways of looking at it. I think people struggle to delineate how much suffering, that's a bad word, how uncomfortable it is acceptable. But to me, like if you can physically move and get up and it's just like, all right, I got to go do this, you're fine. But if you cannot drag yourself up off the couch to go take a piss, that's a real problem. Um, obviously sleep is going to decline as well, but if there's a dramatic decline quickly in sleep, and then also another one that I don't hear discussed a lot, but it's actually a loss or a decline in appetite deep in prep can be a sign that you're totally buried, because you'd expect to be starving at that point or very, very hungry. So those are the things that I could relay in general terms. That last one regarding hunger, if you're using a GLP drug, you kind of have to throw it out the window because your hunger signaling is chemically altered. You've discussed your journey with peptides throughout the past year. Are there any peptides that you've tried that didn't work for you? So I've seen pretty noticeable and aligned benefits to what each thing is supposed to do and what I got from it. I will say, in terms of the noticeable benefit of any of these peptides being like a complete flop from what it's talked about, I would say that DSIP, I believe it's delta sleep inducing peptide. I could have that off, so excuse me, but it's DSIP. It's supposed to help sleep. Now I bought a bunch of that pretty deep in prep when my sleep was shit and I didn't notice anything. And I ended up taking quite a bit more than even the recommended dose. Um, but since the show, I've actually gone back to using it because I read how synergistically it can work with growth hormone. And so whether or not there's this subjective improvement in your actual sleep or how you feel like you're sleeping, if the peptide is real, there is a synergy with growth hormone and how you're getting into deep sleep. So I've continued to use it. With that said, I don't know that most people can expect a very noticeable change to their sleep. With that said, I have read firsthand experiences of people saying that it knocks them out and that it knocks them out so hard that they're groggy the next day and they can only do it a couple times a week because it's such a dramatic response. I did not get that at all. Tips for preparing your significant other for a prep. I think, okay. So outside of actually coaching your significant other, which I do, just going through the process yourself and you're trying to prepare the person that you're with, I'll speak on that because that was a major priority of mine the first time that I went through a prep while I was dating my fiance, Kelsey. She had never been with a bodybuilder, and it was going to be something totally new for her. And I have had some very rough experiences with girlfriends because of my actions and behavior in contest prep and my attitude and all these things. So I spent months leading up to the start of that first prep communicating with her and sending her different things. I had her watch a video of Ian Valair and Melissa Bumstead. They are a married couple. They did a whole podcast years ago with Fuad and talked about going through prep together and what it's like to be the significant other as the other person goes through prep. So communication is just number one. And I will say that I think that it helped that I almost prepared her for the worst and tried to point out the things that may be the most obvious or the most dramatic changes that I was going to experience and go through and why I was going through them. And I would say, I may be like this, and you have to understand that it's not personal. I love you and adore you. It has nothing to do with you. It's because of X, Y, and Z. It's because I'm exhausted from the high cardio. I'm starving. I'm not sleeping. I'm on different drugs that are definitely altering how I think and how I feel. So it's simple, but it truly is the number one thing. It's just communication. I think also as then you go through it, like you've laid the foundation to talk about these things beforehand, that communication has to continue and it has to be proactive as you go through it. You have to say, hey, I just got to be honest with you. I am really feeling empty today. I am completely pulled down today. So if I'm quiet or I'm a little edgy, please don't take it personally. I promise it has nothing to do with you. Those are the best tips that I could give. Um, Preferred timing of SLU. Do you split it up or take it all at once? I think it depends on your dosage, and I think it depends on the time of year that you're in. If you're in prep, off season, what have you. During contest prep, the majority of the time, I was taking it all as one big dose, fasted in the morning, and every single morning I had fasted cardio either on a machine or even the days that I had off from machine cardio, I was still going for an extended walk towards my step count fasted in the morning. So every morning I would take my entire SLU dose. along with some other peptides, fat loss agents, lipolytics, and then go and do some type of basically like zone 2 movement. Eventually, I worked up to a pretty high dose. I was doing 3 milligrams a day, so 3,000 micrograms. And what I would do is 2,000 fasted and 1,000 again pre workout. And right now, I've tapered it back. I've kept some in, but I've tapered it back during the post show rebound. So I take 1,000 for the day, and I take half of that in the morning before cardio. I take half of it before training. Which peptides or compounds have you found make a difference injecting IM or subq specifically into target muscle groups? So I will say the first one that comes to mind is growth hormone. And the only noticeable difference that I've noticed subjectively within my own body is that doing intramuscular shots, the research tells us, I mean, Dr. Scott Stevenson did an entire podcast on this. I know there are other content creators that have disputed this, but then Dr. Scott came with the hard facts. And there is no doubt a quicker and much higher IGF peak from intramuscular shots than IM shots for growth hormone. With that said, the way I've seen that manifest within my own body and my own experience is I've talked about the side effect of getting carpal tunnel, or I've described it as lava hands or lava arms, where it's unbearably painful, burning sensation all up and down my hands and arms, especially from taking a bolus dose of GH before bed. Now, I have found that a subq shot in this scenario seemingly leads to a reduction in that side effect compared to doing one big IM shot before bed. And my theory is that that fast, aggressive, high IGF peak could be leading to greater side effects because it's so dramatically different compared to subq. So because of that, I've actually stuck with subq. In terms of site injecting growth hormone into weak body parts, like, and then going to train them or what have you, I've done it all. I've done pre-workout GH subq. I've done pre-workout GH split into each side into the working muscle. I haven't really noticed anything. I know of people that consistently reported, for an entire off season, he split all of his GH into, a shot into each bicep head. And then next year, his arms, sure enough, were bigger. I've seen that firsthand. That's not just something I read on the forum. I know people that have said this. I don't know what the mechanism is behind that. I don't know if everyone would experience that, but people that I know have reported that with tangible benefit. I just haven't done it myself. A lot of times, anytime that I've ever really done IM, I've done GH in my delts. They've come up quite a bit over the past couple of years, but I've eaten way more food and taken way more drugs the past 2 years than I ever did before. So that's tough to say. I have been using, on specific training days of weak muscles or priority muscles, I've been doing pre-workout IGF LR3 into the working muscle. I do notice an enhanced pump. With that said, again, I'm at an incredibly sensitive spot where I'm ripping through food. I'm on these other drugs that enhance my insulin sensitivity and pumps, retatrutide. On those days, I'm also taking Lantus. I'm on high GH, a good amount of androgens, a lot of food. I shouldn't say a lot of food, but a lot more food than what I dieted on. And so again, it's difficult to tell. As far as any of the other peptides, the only thing that I really noticed IM versus subq was that with MOTS-C, if I was doing more infrequent injections to hit my weekly total. Like, let's say I was doing 5 milligrams twice a week instead of 1.5 milligrams every day. If I put like a bigger shot like that, subq, there was a more tangible lump and swelling and redness compared to if I did a bigger shot of MOTS-c into a muscle, no issue at all. So take that for what it's worth. How do you ensure you get the best quality and quantity of sleep, both in the off season and contest prep, respectively? Supplements, diet timing, environment, etc. I'm not a sleep expert, and I'm not going to say anything that's groundbreaking or that you guys haven't heard on other podcasts. But for the past 10 or 11 months, I've had the exact same sleep schedule. Whereas often in years past for me, it would be cyclical, where during contest prep, I would fall into a good sleep pattern naturally because you're tired sooner, you're done with your food sooner, so you go to bed sooner. And then because of the different hormones that you're using and the hunger signaling, you're up sooner. But then inevitably at some point, either in my rebound, my off season, you get fat and happy and comfortable again. And like I can think of times last off season where I was eating tons of food, and my training days are 7 meals, and I would be eating meal 7 at 1:30 in the morning. As soon as I was done, I would go then lay down and try to get to bed. And that's obviously not a good way to do it. Luckily, I only did that for about a month, and then I got into an awesome sleep schedule. I'll outline what I do for sleep. So I live in a house that has central air, but we're in Florida and I can have the central air set at 60, and the house still may only get to 72. So besides the central air, I have a window AC unit in the bedroom. I turn that on at full blast 2 hours before I go to bed. Okay. I have that going. I have the overhead fan going. And then I separately have like a box fan going. Um, Blackout curtains can help to make it just dark. Dark and cold is how you're going to set up for sleep. Another thing is I spend no time in my bedroom or no time specifically laying in bed other than when it is time to go to bed. I don't have a TV in my bedroom. I don't go in there and hang out on my bed. I use it in a way that I've taught my body that when I lay in this bed, it's time to go to sleep. Um, so it's cold, it's dark. Um, I make it a point. I typically now, if you have skin issues, I would not do this, but I purposely don't shower until about half an hour or an hour before bed. And I take like a warm shower and then, put on what I'm going to wear to bed. And, within a half hour, I'm in bed. And that seems to improve my sleep. Supplement wise, I take a ton of melatonin. I've worked my way up to 60 milligrams of melatonin. I take 10 milligrams or 10 grams of glycine. I take L-theanine. I take taurine. I was doing a CBN isolate, like minus any THC for a while. I'm not sure that did much, to be honest with you. Um, I think in terms of your schedule, this is the most important thing. Like I am in bed by 9 o'clock every single night. And because of that, without an alarm, I get up at the same time every night. And having been someone that's always been a bit of like a night owl, and then now for a long time been in this awesome sleep schedule, I am convinced that if you get 7 hours of sleep from 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 a.m., it is of a higher, more refreshing quality of sleep than if you sleep from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. I swear that first, and I've read about this, and especially using exogenous GH, those first 2 to 3 hours of sleep are supposed to be the most. That's when it's mostly deep sleep and it's the most restorative sleep. So again, not a sleep expert, but take that for what you will. What is the main benefit of using orals prior to a contest? I was just talking about this with someone. I mostly view orals as good for two things. They create a temporary cosmetic look for as long as you're on the orals. And then some of them provide a temporary boost in training performance or ability. So when I think training performance or strength, I think of Anadrol, I think of Anavar, and to some degree, I think of Halo. When I think of creating a cosmetic difference, a look to your visuals, I think about Proviron, I think about Winstrol, and I think about Halo. So utilize those throughout a contest prep as you will. It's not uncommon to, utilize something like Anavar, DHT based. It's not going to cause gyno or any water inflammation. It may even improve your look at touch, but say starting at 10 weeks out to 5 weeks out, where at that point training performance might start to dip or you might start to feel fatigue a bit. You bring that in then, it's pretty mild and it can aid in maintaining your training performance. From the 4 week out mark in, I like Proviron and Winstrol. From as much as 2 weeks out, but ideally just 1 week out in, I like Halo. Um, and that final week, I am now more than ever a big fan of fairly high doses for the last 6 to 10 days of Proviron, of Winstrol, and less so Halo. So this most recent peak that I did for myself, starting at 6 days out or 7 days out, I would have to double check, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm not being transparent. I forget at which point it was either the Saturday or the Sunday before the following Saturday show. I started 200 milligrams of Proviron daily, split AM and PM, 200 milligrams Winstrol, split AM, PM, and 40 milligrams of Halo taken entirely either pre-workout or in the morning. And it absolutely brings you an insane look. Now, it's not going to take you from not being in shape to looking in shape, but when you're already in shape, it brings out a pretty distinct, crazy look. And I have to give credit to AJ Sims. I, for lack of a better term, I stole a lot of that from him. I utilize things that I've heard and seen that he does. And I was very, very pleased with the look. And then 2 weeks post show, I'm actually going to have this a detailed breakdown of this, but I got my blood work done 2 weeks after the contest. And my liver numbers, my lipid numbers, everything were exceptional. Perfect. I looked like a natural teenager on my blood work, other than my testosterone level. um, so it just goes to show you, given the right circumstance, you can be aggressive in the short term. It's temporary. And then if you're doing everything, I'm taking twice the usual amount of TUDCA, twice the usual amount of NAC during those final 2 weeks where all of those drugs are in play. Continued that all throughout the following couple weeks after the show, and it brought back, numbers that looked incredible. So in my next rebound episode, I'm going to bring the blood work up and talk about it, but that's how That's how I see orals being utilized. Now, it doesn't have to be 200 milligrams of those other drugs that I talked about. Even something like 100 milligrams of each, people would consider that aggressive and very beneficial. At what test dosage do you typically find people need an AI, even if running higher DHTs? For example, 2-to-1 DHT to test ratio. Man, this is so individual because even for myself, I have always been a pretty high aromatizer. But when I use those ratios, for example, like I had an off season cycle that I ran very high master on, and it completely tanked my E2 to the point that I was cranky and edgy and my knees hurt and my sex drive wasn't good. And because of that, I slowly worked my testosterone dosage up, and it only brought it up to feeling normal. So I was still nowhere near needing an AI. And this was probably, it was a more aggressive ratio. I was probably on 1,600 milligrams of Masteron and initially like 400 milligrams a test. And that was when things were bad. So then I went up to 600 milligrams a test. Things were still bad. I went up to 800 milligrams a test. And that was when it was starting to feel normal, which is wild because if I had test as the leading compound, 800 milligrams would absolutely warrant an aromatase inhibitor for me and most people. So I think, the question was based around this higher DHT cycle design. I think that answers the question. And I honestly see this with E2 or with EQ to a higher degree. If you are someone that has tried higher EQ than test, you will find for most people, the modulation of your E2 is going to be severe. And that's probably not a great cycle design. That's a big part of why I don't like that cycle design anymore. I prefer to have tests pretty much 2-to-1 to anything else that I'm going to include. And then if I need to run an AI, well, then so be it. But a lot of times I can run high test, a gamma test, and something like 800 EQ, 600 Masteron. And because I have those other two in, I don't need an AI. It just really depends on the individual person, their individual response. And you need to be on top of blood work, but symptoms come first for me for E2 because I have seen guys that come back with an E2 at 110 and they feel great. They feel like an ox. I have seen guys that come back with 110 E2 and they are a mess. And then likewise, I've seen guys that feel great when their E2 is 20, and I know guys that feel terrible when it's 20. So it's very, very individual. What would a typical cruise dose be for an athlete of yours that has advanced muscularity, say a high level heavyweight or super heavyweight? This is a good question. I've definitely evolved in my thinking with this. It comes down to that person's health, where that person is. So they're, advanced muscularly, looking to push up, from heavyweight to super heavyweight or looking to win a pro card at that in one of those weight classes. That's high level shit. And so it depends on when the cruise comes as well. Like I view the season where you're going to do a cruise after your rebound and then you're going to do a pre-prep cruise. For me, I've kind of landed for myself and the guys that have a good health profile, a high risk tolerance, and are not delusional. They are really up at that level. Um, the cruise is going to be a pretty fair amount compared to like a TRT dose. It's definitely going to be much more. And then how that those cruise milligrams are made up will depend on the person's response, how much they aromatize it, etc. Um, but it's not uncommon for me to put guys in this situation on a cruise of somewhere between 600 and 900 milligrams of total anabolics. And I'm probably going to keep GH the same or around half of what it was at peak blast. So if someone was running, let's say they were running 2,200 milligrams of anabolics and 12 IUs of GH, I may bring them down to 800 milligrams total of anabolics and 8 IUs of GH, something like that. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I am in a post-show rebound, pushing things. And then when my time to cruise is up, especially because just 2 weeks post-show, my blood work was excellent, I will get blood work again at the end of the rebound. And I'm going to let that kind of determine how aggressive I stay within the cruise. For example, if I think I'm on about 1,700 milligrams right now. I will probably work that up to about 2,100 milligrams during the rebound. Like once I get to about the 6 week mark, I'll probably bring it up there. I will probably cruise on about 1,000 total milligrams. And I'll go from 20 IUs of GH to something like 14 or 12. Because I'm thinking about that as a point where I want to have enough in to not take a step back. I'm not only trying to hold on to the new tissue that I just built, but ideally it wouldn't be a step back at all. And it might even be a step forward compared to just maintenance and just holding it. I'd like to continue, but just on less. So, that might be a time because I'm probably only going to run this IGF LR3 for another 3 or 4 weeks. That means the final 6 weeks of the rebound, there'll be none of that. I'll probably bring it back in for a rebound and leverage that as another way of potentially driving progress. But that's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the design for a cruise is going to fit the context. So someone with good health, someone at a high level of muscularity, very high goals, and a timeline that has them wanting to compete again within the next year or less at a more muscular level, it's going to be a higher level of cruise. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Your perfect growth cycle. Okay, I'm going to give you guys two answers. I'm going to give you guys the perfect growth cycle for me, what I think works the best, both in terms of progress and managing side effects. But first, I'm going to give you guys my fuck it, get huge cycle, just for the hell of it. If I was just going to throw caution to the wind and I could handle all of this, meaning there's no negatives on appetite or sleep or anything, and I'm just saying, fuck it, I'm trying to get as big as possible, this would be my cycle. I would run high testosterone. I would probably run 1,200 milligrams of tests. I would run 800 to 1,000 milligrams of EQ. I would run as much tren as I could tolerate. And in this hypothetical situation, I would go as high as 500 milligrams a week if I could tolerate it. And I would run, again, this hypothetical person can tolerate it all, no problem. They can still eat. I would run 100 milligrams of Anadrol on training days, and I would have that split between half pre-workout and half before bed. That, and I would take a boatload of GH. I would take, 20 IUs of GH. I'd have Lantus in. Hell, in that situation, I'd probably also have a rapid in, probably post-workout, rapid insulin. And that would be it. That would be my fuck it, get huge cycle. For me, what's best, like, let's say this off season or last off season, even, I ran high tests. So somewhere like 1,000 milligrams of tests, 6 to 800 milligrams of EQ, 6 to 800 milligrams of DECA. Thoughtfully programmed Lantus, probably 1 or 2 days a week. And then again, as much GH as I could possibly handle without getting water retentive carpal tunnel side effects. So, ideally 20 I use a day. If someone is healthy and has high risk tolerance, how would you deploy insulin for maximum progress? I would probably have Lantus in on the designed priority body part days. That day would have its own diet. So you're probably looking at 3 different diets where you run a rest day diet that's pretty low, your regular training day diet, and then a high day that's almost exclusively carbs and protein, no added fats, and the leanest protein sources that you can possibly use. Lantus would be on those days. I would say probably every training day I would do post-workout rapid insulin. I have not personally liked pre-workout insulin. The last thing I want to do is be going hypo or worrying about that while I'm training or having to cut my training short because I've gone hypo. That's a no-go for me. So I like post-workout. I think it makes sense also because I'm going to hit that post-workout rapid insulin intramuscular in the car in the parking lot. I'm going to have my post-workout meal with me. And then when I get home, 45 minutes or an hour, I'm taking down my biggest whole food meal of the day. How do you decide how much to push body weight up in the off season? I think it completely depends on how much muscle the person needs to add, how big their frame is, how their midsection looks relative to the rest of their physique, and whether or not it's a concern. If the midsection is a strong point, I would be more likely to be a little bit loose. Um, Part of that is someone's height and the size of their rib cage and hips. And then another huge one is how long have you been helping this person? And have you seen this person get peeled? Peeled. So if you've gone through like multiple preps with somebody and from various starting points of the prep, they are going to end up peeled in 20 weeks, no matter what. They are willing to go to the end of the earth to show up in shape. And not only that, are they willing to do the work? It looks like they did the work. There are some guys that are willing to kill themselves in contest prep, and they just never look like they're all the way there. This is not me knocking him personally or any of the methodology or anything at all. But, and again, this guy has a killer physique. This guy is way more knowledgeable, way prettier physique than me. So again, this is not a personal knock. But if you look at someone like a guy like Jared Feather, I know that he's doing all the work. I know that he's willing to get uncomfortable. Every single time he gets on stage, it just looks like he's still 5 weeks out from behind. So if that is that guy, I need to keep a tight eye on you in the off season. We cannot let you get love handles or a wet diaper looking ass. We can't have it. Again, if you have somebody that's willing to do the work and it looks like they did the work when they get in shape, like they get nasty hamstrings, lower back, glutes, that person has a way bigger runway to put on muscle, body fat, overall body weight in the off season. You can really push the envelope and try to squeeze as much size as you possibly can out of that off season with a person like that. In prep, if cardio is high and training performance is starting to suffer, would it make sense to decrease cardio if that helps bring training performance back up? You're burning less calories from the reduction of cardio, but a little more from the boost in training performance. No, I don't think this makes sense at all for most people in most situations. I guess it depends on the timeline and how far ahead or behind the person looks. If you're way ahead of schedule and you have 8 weeks to go and training performance is starting to go, you could dial back the cardio some. But the logic or the thinking here that like the uptick in metabolic rate from better training is going to lead to more caloric expenditure to make up for doing less aerobic activity, it just doesn't happen in the real world. Um, I've heard of some guys like trying or wanting to like train twice a day instead of doing cardio. I think that's a bad idea. The thing is, it takes such a little amount of stimulus to hold on to tissue, especially as an enhanced athlete, that the drugs and any training that you are going to do are mostly going to hold on to all the muscle that you have. So then it's just a bodybuilding and getting on stage is about showing up peeled. That's it. So I don't know why people would want to look for tricks or ways of doing less or trying to get peeled easier. Like it's like, why wouldn't you throw everything at trying to be peeled? All right, guys, I think that's it. Actually, I feel like I need to go get this next meal in. So that's everything. Thanks for everybody that followed along. Again, no Instagram now, so leave a comment below if there's something that you want me to answer or something that you want me to touch on. And until next time, guys, I am out.